Now, if we're to decide that certain fossil fuels are to be left in the ground, which ones should they be? Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that they should be the dirtiest ones. It's pretty obvious that they should be the most polluting ones. It's pretty obvious that they should be the ones which currently threaten the world with ecological disaster and indeed threaten their own locations with ecological disaster of a different kind as well. I think you can picture the sort of thing that I've got in mind. Now, this isn't a message that the government of Canada, let alone the government of Alberta, is going to be very keen on. We know that the tar sands are currently being promoted as Canada's economic lifeline, as if this highly developed and highly sophisticated country, this very enterprising nation, didn't have other means of making a living. But of course, this is what the oil curse does, that as soon as you identify that resource as being your economic lifeline, everything else shrivels. Capital is diverted away from other projects. We've already seen how the renewables industry in this country has been starved of cash and a lot of it poured into the oil patch instead. You find that political attention is diverted away from other aspects of the economy and concentrated on that. And you find that, as I was saying, the political tenor of the nation changes. And in almost all major oil-producing nations, the oil industry effectively recruits a political class to pursue its interests. And in pursuing its interests, that political class has to brutalize the sensibilities of the nation and turn it into a less decent and less civilized place. So if you're the government of Nigeria, it must trample on the heads of the Ogoni. If you're the government of Canada, you must trample on the heads of the First Nations people. If you are the government of Ecuador, you must be prepared to spill oil into one of the most diverse rainforests on Earth. If you're the government of Canada, you must see all sorts of heavy metals and organic compounds flow down the Athabasca River. That is the brutalization process, which can, if it's allowed to let rip, eventually take over the entire character of a nation. We've seen it again and again. It is called the oil curse. And this is what the government of this country appears to want to be the destiny of Canada, of this very beautiful and very sophisticated nation. And I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to fight it. To fight it not for your own sake, and not just for the sake of the Canadians who are being immediately affected by the devastating pollution and habitat destruction, which we see in Alberta and will see in Saskatchewan as well, but to fight it for the benefit of all the world's people, including those who are already being hammered by the impacts of climate change. Because, of course, one of the great ironies of climate change is that those most responsible for it largely, by and large, live in temperate regions of the world, like this one. And temperate regions of the world have a climatic resilience that other parts of the world do not have. We can cope with a few degrees rise in temperature, especially as we're rich as well, so we can afford to adapt to them. We'll get by for a few decades. We'll be hit last and be hit least by the impacts of climate change. But already in many parts of the world, people are being harmed directly by it. In the Sahel, in Africa, in Bangladesh, in fact in much of South Asia, and indeed Southeast Asia, across the Maghreb, in fact all the way across the Maghreb through Mesopotamia, down Afghanistan and Pakistan, there's been severe disruptions of climatic patterns there. And these people are scarcely responsible in the majority of cases. They are scarcely responsible for the problem of climate change, and yet they are being hammered by it already. So in calling for people to act on climate change, we are not in the first instance calling for them to act in their own self-interest. Of course, it's in our genetic interest to do so because our children and our grandchildren are very likely to be severely affected by it. But in the first instance, it's a call for altruism. It's a call to act in the moral interest, to act in the interests of the people whom we are directly affecting. Now, we know that climate change could destroy the lives of a very large number of the world's people. We know that it threatens the world's supplies of food and water, and that it threatens potentially to exacerbate famine to such an extent that it makes all previous instances look like sideshows at the circus of human suffering. And we know that if we allow this to go ahead, we'll be responsible for it. And who here wants that on his or her conscience? Who here, if you truly look it in the face, could live with that? Only a psychopath. And we must not let the psychopaths take over the asylum. We must not let that tiny number of people who don't care about their impacts on humanity to govern the response of those who do care. We, ladies and gentlemen, are the people who care. Let's make our voices count.